It's up on Canvas, so you could watch it. There is no audio. We're using the same tools, plus I'm going to go over a couple extra tools today just so you can see what other tools we would be using for stuff. Inserting edge loops, extruding, and beveling are those three that you're going to use consistently throughout. But we have some other ones that we're also going to play with. So here is, in this state, is probably about as close as we're going to get to a finished product as far as modeling goes on here. We could take it further and further and further and really add a whole bunch of other stuff to these. But as far as time-wise, we just don't have the time to put into doing something like that. So the next stage after this is done is that we would go through and we would texture it, and then we would render it out and make a nice picture or a video of this because we want to have the thing spinning. You'll also notice how clean everything looks. There's nothing like crazy going on. Kind of your giveaway when you model something is if you have crazy stuff going on, like this one random vertice, which is kind of like off like that. You know, like for no reason at all, there's just one random vertice sticking there. And that just doesn't make sense how that's there, and it's kind of jaggedy. I definitely wouldn't want to have that. So I want to clean it up. If it's supposed to be there, I want to make it look like it's supposed to be somehow lined up with that. Okay? So that's where that second video is going to get you, is building the bottom piece of this and then refining this thing. So we have like a little dividing line here. If this is an actual assembled piece, there's usually like two parts that go together, and there's usually a seam that would run around the entire thing. So we wanted to include that. Just some random stuff like this, you know, some sort of vent or something happening here. And then I have a little battery pack right there, and then that has like a little hinge on it, and then that hinge has a little bar on it. And then even like the hinge has a little bit of a separation here. Oops. So we can see this bar inside of it. Okay, just to again add some more realism to it. There's another vent type thing on this side. You'll find that as you add stuff, that sometimes it doesn't even matter necessarily what you're adding, as long as you've added some sort of detail to it. That'll kind of come off. As long as it looks like it's supposed to be there, then people will believe that it actually serves a purpose. And then this little antenna that, I don't know what it does, but I'm assuming communicates with the RC. I could also have this maybe like over here or something and duplicate it and stick one on this side too. Okay, so there's lots of different layouts I could do for, you know, how I have these parts and how I play with the stuff. Okay, so I'm going to just make a new scene, and I just want to show some more polygon tools that will help you out. As you start progressing and you start modeling stuff further away from just that cylinder with some divisions and extrusions, the more likely you're going to be bouncing into some of these other tools. And you'll see there's three menus, right? There's the mesh, the edit mesh, and the mesh tools. These are like the three big ones. And you don't use like everything all the time, but there are certain times where I'm constantly jumping up and hitting some tools. So I'm going to make a cylinder here. There we go. And we've shown before how we can take the caps off of things like this. Okay. Now it's not typically a good thing to leave a division like this where it's perfectly flat, because if I wanted to smooth it and I hit 3 to smooth it out, what I'm going to get is this. You can see that my perfectly smooth now turns into this rippling mess. Okay, and the reason is of how it's transitioning from this flat surface that has no divisions to it to this other surface that has a bunch of divisions, all of these little lines. So if I go to this face here and this face here, I can go to my edit mesh, and I can go to the face area and say poke. And what that does is it puts that cap back on. Now in this case, it's a pretty obvious thing, like why do we take the cap off just to put the cap back on? But in some cases, you don't have that. Okay, in some cases you're building that shape and then you just need the divisions to go to the center. Okay, so now if I hit 3, it's definitely not perfect, but it is much better than it was. Okay, now the way I can get this to be much better is how it's transitioning. When it takes this point and it goes to this point and it goes to that point and this point, there's some sort of weird interpolation that's causing that rippling effect to happen. So if I just add more divisions, that will take care of the problem. So if I go to my edge here and my edge down here, and I added a bevel to this, that adds more divisions and it smooths it out. So when I hit 3, I don't get any weirdness happening there, okay? Because I have enough divisions to have a nice transition happening in there. When I only have like a division here, here, and then a couple other ones, we get some funky results. So we need to add bevels, we need to add divisions in order to compensate for that, okay? Now, some other things that might happen. Let's say we accidentally deleted some faces, all right? So I need to add more faces in here. So under the mesh tools, there's a bunch of tools in here that we could play with. The Append tool is one of the ones I typically go to for doing that. It allows you to basically draw in faces, okay? And the way we draw them in is we're filling in essentially holes. We're clicking on edges and filling in that gap. So here, you'll see that there's an opening, obviously. I'm going to click on one of these edges, and what it does is it brings up this pink selection, and you'll see how there's arrows here, arrows there, and arrows there. Remember how when we created some surfaces, some polygons, one side was black and the other side was gray, like we could see it, and we had to reverse the display so we could see the correct shading. This is the same thing. There's actually a direction that this wants to go. The direction is with the arrows. So I would click on the next arrow in line, which is this one, click on the next arrow in line, which is that one, and then that replaced that face that I just deleted. So then I would hit enter. So now it looks like that face is right back to where it was. I go back to Mesh Tools, I go back to Append, I go click on the edge, I follow the arrows around. There's the arrow, and it automatically knows you're doing that, got it, and it connects it, okay? So now we just filled in that spot, and so now we wouldn't notice if there was an opening there or not because we just filled it in. So the Append tool is great for when you accidentally delete faces and you need to put them back on. Now let's pretend that we have something a bit more complex. Let's say we had a sphere, and let's say I want to extrude these faces here. So I go to extrude it, and I say, cool, that's exactly what I want, that's perfect. But then I come over to this side and I realize, whoops, I accidentally extruded that side of it too. I don't want that because that's going to screw up my model. So one way I could do the correction to this is just to delete those extra faces, then jump to the Append tool, and then draw this in. Now I click on one of the edges and I look for the arrows, okay? And I just follow the arrows around. Click on each edge. Now with this one, I can't go like make one face and then make the other face because it doesn't exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all the faces here. There it goes. And then I can't leave it like this. I can't leave a big hole here. These divisions have to connect. We have to have quads, four-sided faces all over the place. So I would go to my mesh tools, I would go to Multicut, and I would click on this corner, and hit enter, and that puts the line there. Then I would click on this corner, click on that corner, hit enter, this corner, that corner, hit enter. And so now I've re-put that back in there. Now the only thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't automatically smooth those faces out, because right now they're just kind of flat. Obviously they look really flat. So I can try a couple things, but most likely it's going to be just grabbing those points and just pulling them out. Okay, maybe pulling them up a little bit. So that should help kind of smooth that out. Now you'll see even though I smoothed it, it still looks like it's there. It still looks like there's something going on there. Under Mesh Display, there's two options, Harden Edge and Soften Edge. Okay, if I go to Harden Edge, you may have seen like this looks like a video game type thing that you've seen like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. That's how video games were, because they were just blocky. It's like exactly what you see. So then they invented this thing called Soften Edge, which makes it appear to be soft even though it's not. It's still the same edges. So we go to Soften Edge, and now you can't really tell that that division has been cut out, okay? Because it softens the transition to what we're seeing between all these edges, all right? So that's what we need to do. You go to Soften Edge because that option needs to be in there to tell it to soften those out. Now we set it to 30. And then I could tell too, like I've actually pulled this out way too far. I'm just going to push that back in just a hair. There we go. Good. Alright, so now that looks pretty good. Doesn't look like we've actually cut a hole out of that at all. Okay. So that was, there it is, a pen tool that we used to fill it in, and then we used the multi-cut tool to draw those lines out. If you see that you're getting a weird area, sometimes you just need to delete edges and then refill them in too. So like up here, these are all triangles, okay? So if I tried to go through with our insert edge loop and tried to use an insert edge loop up here, it doesn't work, okay? The insert edge loop works on quads only. So when I click here, it's going to work because all of these faces are four-sided. So it knows which one to go to. It knows to jump across to get it. Here with a triangle, it doesn't know which way to go. It doesn't know if it should go this way or if it should go that way. So that's where we could use something like the multi-cut to do something like that. So I can just click on these edges and draw that shape right in. Okay? Now if I want to delete that, I go to my edges, I hold down Control, and I hit delete. Okay? Remember, we don't just hit delete on those, we have to hit Control delete to actually delete it. Now remember, they look pretty close, right? Like if I get closer to this and I hit just regular delete or Control delete, it looks exactly the same. Okay? So I'm going to hit regular delete, and then I'm going to hit 3 to smooth it out. And maybe we won't see a difference in this case. Let me do it to somewhere else. Let's say I just deleted these faces here, and then hit 3. Oops, not there. Here. There we go. You'll see how when I hit 3 that these lines get like really wiggly. Because I've deleted the edges but never deleted the vertices, they get wiggly. So if I go to Vertex, you can see that I still have these vertices kind of hanging out here. Once I delete those, then that creates a nice smoother transition in there. Now these are not quads still because I deleted the edge. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges here, right? This one has 4, that one has 4, but that one and this one have 5. So I need to have quads. So I would go in with my multi-cut and I would cut it from here to there. And then I would have quads, and I would get a much smoother result when I smooth this out. Okay. Some other things that are kind of helpful. Delete that. I'm going to create a plane. Merging vertices. Okay. So let's say that I have these vertices here, and I just don't want to have all those vertices there. I can go to Edit Mesh, and I can merge vertices. Okay. So if I go to merge here, it's not going to do anything because what it does is it grabs that selection and it looks this far away from each one. So it's looking 0.01 units away from each point. If it finds a point, it merges it. These are further than 0.01. So as I crank this up, you'll see eventually it'll merge those points together. Okay? Or I can grab these and merge those together, and it puts them all into one spot. Okay? Now in this case, not really practical. Like, why would I want to do that? Because now I've created all these triangles. But sometimes you'll do this, and then you'll go through and maybe delete some of your edges that you have there. And then you can come back in with your multi-cut. And then you could just redraw out that shape. Oops. Okay, so that gives me just this nice corner here without having to worry about, trying to move the points to get it lined up with that. Sometimes you literally have stuff that you've duplicated and you just need to put it together. So if I were to grab a sphere, actually just grab a cube, that would be a little bit simpler. I'm going to insert an edge loop. There we go. Delete the faces. There we go. So let's say I duplicated this and I flip it over to this side. And I want to join these two pieces together, okay? Because they're not part of that same polygon, they're two separate polygons, I can't append the polygon, I can't fill holes, I can't attach anything. They just, right now, are just two separate objects. So if I go to Mesh Combine, that makes them one object. When I select them now, they turn green, meaning they're one object. So now I could go through Append, and I could append these together, okay? Before I couldn't do that. I go back here and I try to hit the append tool you'll see it's not going to let me do anything to this, only to that one box. So I go to combine them. Now they're combined. I go to the append tool, and I could append them to connect it together like this. Oops, that was a random face I just created on accident. There we go. And I could append this to here, and I could append this to here, and I could append this to there. Okay, so now that's all connected, all one box. I hit 3, everything's nice and smooth. But let's pretend I didn't want to have that division in there. Let's pretend that I just want to take these two shapes and just join them together and connect them. That's where merge comes in. So I grab the vertices here, I go to edit mesh, and I say merge verts right there. And because I've only grabbed 2, it automatically merges those 2 vertices together. If I grab 4 or 3, it wouldn't. But because I only grabbed 2, it does it. So I can merge these. I can grab these 2, oops, and merge that. Grab these 2 and merge that. So now I've merged all those together without adding any extra divisions inside here. Okay? So merge is another tool that I'll use all the time as I'm working on my stuff. Here's that delete too. Like if you forget it's control delete, you can just go to that for it. I'm trying to think what else I might use. Yeah, some of these you like really never use. Poke we talked about. Wedge is a neat one. If I grab, oops, I have to go to multi. I'm going to grab a face, shift click an edge, and then I can go to wedge. And wedge will create like this vent, like U shape, right? So if I'm trying to create some sort of ventilation type thing, pull it up like this, go back to my multi, grab this edge, wedge it this way. The edge is specifying which direction that wedge is going to turn, right? So I told it on this edge so it jumps that way. I can control the divisions so it's nice and smooth or blocky. I can grab any one of these edges, faces first, then the edge, and then do that wedge, and you'll get that rounding happening to it. Okay, so you can create some really cool stuff like that. It's pretty neat. What else would we use? Smoothing we've talked about, mirror cutting, that's all good. Offsetting edge loop is a neat one too. We have a cube, and what I want to do is I want to put, I'm going to delete a face here. There we go. I want to put a division going around here, and then I want to have an offset right there. So I'm going to insert an edge loop, and what I want is an even edge loop on each side. Okay, I just want like a thickness going around it. So I'm going to go to my mesh tools and go to offset. And what this does, I click and drag on this edge, and it allows me to create an offset here. So I have this perfect offset. Now, I could have also done that using a bevel, but the problem with the bevel is it's going to try to round it, and I don't want it to round it. I just want this extra little bit of offset here. And then I can take these 2 faces going around, and I could extrude it, and then I could push that in. So when I created my little seam going around the item, that's how I created that seam wrapping around the item. Just putting an edge loop around, offsetting it, and then just extruding that piece in. Okay. A couple other neat things. Let's say I needed to get something to line up perfectly with these faces here. I can grab those faces, and I can go to edit mesh, and I can say duplicate. And the trick to all of these, let me just click that. If you look here, it tells you what to select. So it says face. So when you select faces, you can use these. When you select edges, you can use those. When you select vertices, you can use the other one. So with this, I'm going to duplicate these faces. Okay. Now when it duplicates it, it goes into this kind of like weird mode, kind of like extrude, where it wants me to like pull it out. But I don't really want to pull it out. I want to leave it exactly where it is. So I just go hit F8. Hit F8, and there we go. Okay, so now I have that shape sitting right on top of this. So then what I could do is anything I wanted, right? So I could extrude it and pull it out. So now I have this little area that matches perfectly with that. And then maybe I'll extrude it again. And then maybe rotate it down. I picked a weird angle, so it definitely looks like it's not right on. There we go. And maybe I'll scale it down so it's flat. Nudge it over. Extrude it again. Pull it down. There we go. Alright, so now I have this thing that matches perfectly with the contour of this lined up with that. So if I'm trying to create something that matches perfect, there we go. And then I could have screws or bolts or whatever that make it look like it's actually attached to it or something. Okay. So those are the tools that we're going to be using throughout. I believe that's all the other ones I use. Slide edge, target weld. And some of these are just redundant. Like you can use it for this process or that process. I'll show another one real quick. Let's say I grab. I'll delete all these faces here, and I can go to Edit Mesh. Or nope, go to Mesh and say Fill Hole. Okay, the fill hole did exactly what Append does, except I don't have to click all the way around it. Okay, but I still have to go back to my Multicut tool and still go through and cut this back into quads. And they really improved the tool. We used to actually have to click like on each one. We were never able to do like that. So if you ever had to do that in the past, you would appreciate it more. There we go. So very quickly I was able to chop that back up, and then I could kind of smooth out those divisions and stuff. Okay, so those are the tools that we're going to be using in the next video. You'll see me use them. Like I said, there's no audio, so it's just kind of like looking at the process. Once you've seen the first video, how we create the shell of it, it's a lot of that just over and over and over again, creating the rest of it. Okay, and anything you model, it's going to be the exact same thing. You don't need to know what tools I'm clicking on, or where I'm putting divisions, or where I'm beveling. You just need to see the process for it. Like, how am I getting my legs to look the way they look? Oh, you're adding more divisions on top, more divisions here, making sure these are nice and round. That's pretty much it, okay, for any item that you create.